Peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to all of the new and returning listeners. How are you all doing? Thanks for joining me for another live session. There is certainly more than enough going on in this crazy world right now to keep you glued to the news stations. So I don't take it lightly that you're choosing to be here for the live. As usual, there's a lot to get into, so I am going to go through it and then I'm going to read some of your comments at the end. But welcome to all of you, to the moderators, all of the folks who are just now coming in. Please go ahead and hit the like for us and share it and help us get the information out to others. But welcome to all of you. So, family, you know that we have a lot to cover, right? We've been in an interesting series with these maps. And there's so much information, that I'm uncovering just by studying some of these maps, things that they wanted to keep hidden. We're learning that these maps were more than just geographical tools. Unlike the modern maps, the old maps blended geography, mythology, and theology into one representation of the world. Now, in the previous sessions, we found out that some of the maps portrayed giants, strange creatures, like I think the strangest of all for me was the one with the dog-headed man. And they also had mysterious lands that are now long forgotten. And we can certainly see that a lot of efforts have been made to conceal this information, especially about the giants and Hyperborea. And when you look at some of this information, we can see how it proves scripture, but they don't want to have the world believe that Genesis 6 is a thing and that it's real and that there is a bloodline in the earth that did not come from Adam. But when you consider and you put all of this together, you have to see that that this is true, particularly when you think about the passage of the wheat and the tares. Why did the Most High tell the Israelites to get rid of those folks? He didn't want them mixing with the ites and those people because the bloodline was tainted. So we're certainly seeing that that is the case. And yeah, they've been doing their best to keep that information hidden. So we're going to uncover the hidden hand involved in all of this as well. We want to know what is the Catholic connection, and then look at some things that we're talking about today. So we left off talking about this guy, the one that everyone loves to hate, and Operation Paperclip in Greenland. So if you have not watched the other videos, please go ahead and just watch the playlist. So he believed that the Aryans are the descendants of the Hyperboreans and actually thought that Iceland may have been ancient Thule. Now, again, it can be pronounced Thule, or Thule. So no need to go back and forth with me regarding the pronunciation. Look it up for yourself and you'll see that there are various variations. It's a minor thing to me, so I'm really not going to get hung up on that. It's the main content that I'm really, looking at. But there are some things that we need to uncover as we move forward, now that we know who we are as a people, and see how these things apply to us. So we know that based on the information covered thus far, that the Germans were exploring in Antarctica in search of the ancient Aryan homeland. However, Britain and the United States were thwarting their efforts. Why? That's the question. Why were they trying to block what the Germans were working on? And this is the part that we really need to know about. So they knew that Adolf had tapped into a supernatural source that allowed the Germans to invent things never seen before. And they were not going to be left out of it. And some of you may have heard about the U-boat. This was amazing to them. Almost daily, the Allies were dealing with ships sinking because of the Nazi U-boats. Also, German rocket technology was the most advanced in the world at that time. They were using weapons that were far ahead of any other country. So where were they getting that information from? That's the big question, because as I've said many times, them folks are just not that smart. So we need to do some digging, family. We're going to look at this book called The Rise of the Fourth Reich and the secret societies that threatened to take over America. It was written by Jim Marrs, a journalist and best-selling author. Some of you may have read the book. Just looking at some of the information on the back cover, it says, in his explosive new book, the legendary Jim Marrs, author of the underground bestseller Rule by Secrecy, reveals the frightening real possibility that today the United States is becoming the Fourth Reich. Becoming, or already is. It says the continuation of an ideology thought to have been vanquished more than a half century ago. This concept may seem absurd to those who cannot see past the rose-colored spin, hype, and disinformation poured out daily by the corporate mass media, most of which is owned by the very same families and corporations who supported the Nazis before World War II. And you're going to see this as we go along. So he's going to explain that this National Socialism never died, but rather its insidious philosophy is alive and active in America. And that's what most people don't want to accept. But again, as we go through this, you're going to be asking some questions if you have not heard about some of these things. So it starts by asking or talking about the history of how the Nazis, armed with advanced technology and the greatest hoard of treasure in history, were able to escape justice at the end of World War II. Now, this is the part of the story that's often not talked about. So Jim Marrs says this is perhaps the greatest untold story of the 20th century. Now, here is some information that may be surprising to some. He says, from the days of Lyndon B. Johnson to those of George W. Bush, there has been talk of America turning fascist. Now, for those who are paying attention, the nation is certainly headed in that direction. He makes a statement, again, that will be shocking to a lot of people. He says the Germans were defeated in World War II, but not the Nazis. Now just pause and think on that. The ideology that drove Hitler is still alive and well. He says the Nazis scattered to the four corners of the world. Many of them came to the United States and penetrated what Dwight D. Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. If you're familiar with that term and understand how it works, now you know what's fueling it. He says they escaped with the loot of Europe, so they left with the wealth, as well as information on how to build rocket science, and even more exotic technologies. So he says some of this technology was so advanced that it remains classified in the US government even today. And again, we're asking the question, where did they get those exotic technologies from? Where did they get that information? Because we can see that after World War II, a lot of things were being invented rather quickly. So we know that they got this information from somewhere. Now, it goes on to say that it is estimated that as many as 100,000 ranking Nazis remained at large after the war. You all, that's a lot of people compared to the small number who were arrested. So that tells you that the cabal didn't want them to be captured. Listen to what it says. As such, it constitutes one of the largest cults in the world today, stated Peter Lavanda. And the second generation is being trained and indoctrinated in the streets of London, Berlin, New York, Buenos Aires, and in secret, heavily armed estates like Colonia Dignidad in Chile. And we're going to talk about Argentina and Chile in a bit when we look at the involvement of the Catholic Church. The author says, while there can be no doubt that Bormann's surviving Nazi empire still exerts tremendous control over world economies and politics even today, the full extent may never be known. All of this should make sense, family, if you've been listening or if you listened to the series we did on Rome and how Rome just morphed into something else. They became the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. Just think about that. The Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. It goes on to say, what is known is that many of Nazi Germany's most brilliant minds continued their work outside of Europe after the war, most notably in the United States. Are you shocked to hear that? Most notably in the United States. So I'm going to play another segment from Admiral Byrd's interview. I shared this before, but I want you to pay attention to the nations he named. Pay close attention to what he says.
Admiral Byrd, is there a competition among other nations to try to get information about Antarctica and possibly to secure some of these resources?
Well, yes. There are now 7 nations very much interested. Russia is interested tremendously. That I'm sure of. Australia has an expedition down there. The Argentine, the Chile, New Zealand, Britain, and so on. Now, you can understand those people down there being interested because they live down there. The New Zealanders, the Argentinians, the Chileans, and Australians. And so we don't do much about claiming anything.
Admiral, you make this sound a little crowded. Are there that many expeditions now there or en route there?
Well, you know, as I said, it's the most peaceful place in the world, but I don't think it will be for long because of this intense interest on the part of other nations and this nation.
The intense interest of other nations and this nation. So he named 7 of them. Keep those nations in mind, family, because there's some interesting stuff that's going on with a lot of those nations that he named. So the thing is, those nations, particularly the United States and Great Britain, if you go back and look at everything that happened in the 1940s and look at the advancements, you will be surprised, and you will see that a lot of those things directly tie to what Hitler was doing. He said there is intense interest on the part of other nations in this nation. Why? Well, some of you may have already heard that Admiral Byrd's son found a diary, a secret diary, years later, where Byrd wrote about a location in Inner Earth, and he was told not to disclose it. So he wrote things in his log when they went on Operation Paperclip, High Jump, in 46. And it was supposed to be the largest expedition ever to travel to Antarctica after World War II. Now, Byrd was asked if he would mount a large armada and go for 4 months to explore, but they were not gone that long. They didn't stay that long because apparently something happened. The official report is that they experienced extremely bad weather, but the diary says they found a strange land in the Inner Earth. And again, his son found this diary after he died. So Byrd wrote that his plane was taken control of when they reached a certain point over Antarctica, and that he saw flying disc-shaped objects. And then he went to this place found this place in Inner Earth called Crystal City, where he met a being called the Master. And then Byrd describes the beings there as Nordic looking or tall whites. But his story was basically squashed, and he was ordered to remain silent, and all of his information was considered classified. Now, what's interesting is that the modern day UFO phenomenon began when? In the 40s. What was going on during that time? World War II. So we're going to look at some excerpts from his diary. And then you decide, whether this is just a bunch of nonsense or if there could be something to it. So he begins recording what was happening based on the time. Apparently, the official report said there was a block of time where control lost contact with him. They didn't really know where he was. So as he's writing in this diary, he says the altitude changed to 2,950 feet, and they were encountering some strong turbulence. And then he says, we're crossing over the small mountain range, and we're going northward as best as can be ascertained. Beyond the mountain range is what appears to be a valley with a small river or stream running through the center portion. There should be no green valley below, is what he says. Something is definitely wrong and abnormal here. We should be over ice and snow. So he says, to the port side are great forests growing on the mountain slopes. Our navigation instruments are still spinning. The gyroscope is oscillating back and forth. And then he says, I alter altitude to 1,400 feet and execute a sharp left turn to better examine the valley below. It's green with either moss or a type of tight-knit grass. He says, but the light here is different. I can't see the sun. So he says, we make another left turn and we spot what seems to be a large animal of some kind below. It appears to be an elephant. No, it looks like a mammoth. He says, this is incredible. Yet there it is. So he said they decrease the altitude again and they take out the binoculars to get a better look at this animal. And he says it's definitely a mammoth-like animal. Report this to base camp. So then we see about 35 minutes later, he says, now we're encountering more rolling green hills. The external temperature indicator reads 74 degrees Fahrenheit. So he says, I'm puzzled over the what's going on with my instruments? Now they seem normal. He says, he's telling the person with him, attempt to contact base camp. And then he says, radio was not functioning. So 11:30 hours, he says there's a countryside below. It's more level and normal, if I may use that word. Ahead, we spot what seems to be a city. That's impossible. He says the aircraft seems light and oddly buoyant. The controls refuse to respond. Then he says, my God, off our port and starboard wings, or off the port and starboard wings, are a strange type of aircraft. They are closing rapidly alongside. They are disc-shaped and have a radiant quality to them. They are close enough now to see the markings on them. It's a type of SWAT sticker. He says, this is fantastic. Where are we? What has happened? So he's tugging at the controls again, but they will not respond. He says, it seems like we're caught in some type of invisible vice grip of some type. He continues recording. He says, our radio crackles and a voice comes through in English, but it has a slight Nordic or German accent. And they're telling him, welcome to our domain. We're going to land you in 7 minutes. You're in good hands. So he says he took note that his engine stopped running and the aircraft is being controlled somehow. So the controls are useless. And then he gets another radio message as they're beginning to land. And in moments, the plane shudders slightly and begins a descent as though caught in some great unseen elevator. The downward motion is negligible, and we touch down with only a slight jolt. Then at 11:45 hours, he says, I'm making a hasty last entry in the flight log. Several men are approaching on foot toward our aircraft. They are tall with blonde hair. In the distance is a large shimmering city pulsating with rainbow hues of color. I do not know what's happening, or I do not know what's going to happen now, but I see no signs of weapons on those approaching. I now hear a voice ordering me by name to open the cargo door. So I comply. So from this point, he says, I write all of the following events here from memory. So this is after he returns, and he's writing down what took place when they got out of their aircraft. He says, it defies the imagination and would seem all but madness if it had not happened. The radio man and I are taken from the aircraft, and we are received in a most cordial manner. So they enter this building, supposedly, and they are taken to, again, this being that they call the master. And one of the hosts says, have no fear, Admiral, you have an audience with the master. So he says he's walking along and trying to get his eyes to adjust to the light there. And then he says, two beings motioned us. Now, it's strange that he didn't say men. Why is he describing them as beings? They motion us toward the awaiting conveyance, and they, this is afterwards, so I skipped a lot, but I have the link here for those who want to read the whole thing. I'm kind of moving back to the part where he's back in the aircraft. And he says that the engines are idling and we boarded immediately. He says the whole atmosphere seemed charged now with a certain air of urgency. After the cargo door was closed, the aircraft was immediately lifted by that unseen force until we reached an altitude of 2,700 feet. Two of the aircraft were alongside for some distance, guiding us on our return way. So he says, I must state here, the airspeed indicator registered no reading, yet we were moving along at a very rapid rate. So those who were riding alongside says, we're leaving you now, your controls are free. Auf Wiedersehen. Well, we definitely know that's German. So he says he watched for a moment, as they disappeared into the pale blue sky. And then we quickly recovered the control of the aircraft. He said, we didn't speak for some time, each man in his own thoughts. Now, his entry log continues. He says, we are again over vast areas of ice and snow and approximately 27 minutes from base camp. We radio them and they respond. We report all conditions normal. Base camp expresses relief at our reestablished contact. Now, on March 11th, 1947, he says, I have just attended a staff meeting at the Pentagon. I have stated fully my discovery and the message from the master. All is duly recorded. The president has been advised. I am now detained for several hours, 6 hours, 39 minutes to be exact. I'm being interviewed intently by top security forces and a medical team. It was an ordeal. I am placed under strict control via the national security provisions of the United States. I am ordered to remain silent in regard to all that I have learned on the behalf of humanity. Incredible. So he says, I am reminded that I am a military man and I must obey orders. So, family, the final entry says, these last few years elapsed since 1947. So we're talking almost 10 years later. And he says, these years have not been kind. I now make my final entry in the singular diary. In closing, I must state that I have faithfully kept this master's secret as directed all these years. It has been completely against my values of moral right. Now I seem to sense the long night coming on, and this secret will not die with me, but as all truth shall, it will triumph, and so it shall be. This can be the only hope for mankind. So he's saying, I've seen the truth, and I've done my duty toward the monstrous, listen to what he called it, the monstrous military-industrial complex. Military man, he describes it as a monstrous military-industrial complex. He says, I have seen that land beyond the pole, that center of the great unknown. So what are your thoughts? Do you think it's all just make-believe? He made all of this up. I mean, what are your thoughts here? Because as I go on, I mean, you might say, yeah, I think it's just a crazy person. You know, he's a madman, just like Paul Hellyer, the former Canadian defense minister. And we talked about him in the last session. But apparently they are not the only ones saying that there are other entities here. They're not the only ones. A former Israeli defense minister says the United States and the state of Israel have been working with extraterrestrials. So let's take a listen to this.
Break out the theremin, because this next story is just begging for a spooky sci-fi background. After 30 years at the helm of the Israeli space security program, and after receiving 3 Israeli security awards, retired Israeli general and respected professor Chaim Eshed is now unveiling that yes, there are aliens among us, yes, Israel has made contact with them, and no, humanity is not ready for them. Also, before you start doubting his words, the 87-year-old Eshed was clear in his recent interview with Yediot Ahronot News that he's not talking about immigration, but rather about a galactic federation complete with an underground base on Mars, where there are American and alien representatives apparently present. He also explains that President Trump both knows about them and was on the verge of disclosing their existence, only to be persuaded not to by the Federation, in order to avoid mass hysteria and panic here on Earth. Apparently, humanity just still has a long way to grow before we can understand the gravity of their presence. The final question, however, is what do they want?
What do they want? He says. What do they want? Now, for those who refuse to believe that there are forces of darkness at work in the world, they will believe the lie that they are extraterrestrials and they mean us no harm. Scripture points to a different ending. It paints a different picture. And I've probably been looking into some of this, I want to say maybe 15 years or more, watching a lot of the ancient alien channels, a lot of the History Channel documentary, etc. And over time, listening to how the wording has changed, they are fully convinced that there were beings who came from somewhere else and seeded portions of the population. Now, if we turn to scripture, it tells us where that seed came from. It didn't come from Adam. So as I've been, looking into the information and then trying to connect some of these dots, particularly to where we are now and what happened, 2 years ago when they had all of these sightings, or it may have been a year, had all these sightings all of a sudden, and they're having all of these meetings, having people to come and appear before Congress and talk about, things that about UFO and what was known, what was not known, etc. It seems like they're trying to do some disclosure a little at a time, a little at a time. And it's interesting that they have these people, defense ministers, in these high positions saying, all of a sudden, yes, this is true. So let's listen to the last part of this.
Research and understand the fabric of the universe.
So I think I'm going to play that part again. I don't know if you caught the first part.
But perhaps thankfully for us, Eshed says that it's essentially just to research and understand the fabric of the universe.
Okay. So apparently he's saying that's why this Israeli defense ministers say that they're here. They're just trying to understand. That's the most ridiculous answer I've ever heard. They're supposed to be super intelligent beings, but they come here to understand the fabric of the universe? Really? Really? They're the super intelligent beings, but they come here to understand the fabric of the universe. So, yeah, I'm not buying that one. I mean, yeah, I think they're just saying what they think, will sit well with the public for now. But of course, we know that there's more to that. So let's go back to the book, this book. It's called The Rise of the Fourth Reich. I don't know if you all are familiar with Jim Marrs, but I mean, some of the information in the book, you really have to say, I kind of see how this can be true. But he says after the war, that Interpol officials insisted that all of its files were destroyed in Allied bombings. Do you believe that? All of the files were destroyed? He goes on to say that according to researcher Von Young, a Swedish policeman named Harry Soderman, who had worked with Interpol since its inception, argued that an aborted attempt in 1945 to take the files out of Germany left them in the hands of the French. The next year, Interpol was reestablished with strong support from the French police and headquartered in Paris. Also in 1946, Hoover sidestepped the U.S. State Department by attending a meeting in Brussels to formally reconstitute Interpol, where he was elected vice president. Former U.S. Army intelligence officer William Spector stated Hoover gained blackmail leverage over many prominent American business and political leaders by acquiring the Nazi Interpol intelligence files at the end of World War II. Now, isn't it interesting that now they're saying that more than likely Epstein was working with who? Not just those who say they were us, but also our government. Listen, it says, to this day, Interpol officials have declined to seek out Nazi criminals, claiming such action is beyond its jurisdiction. Really? But they went and got Noriega. That wasn't beyond their jurisdiction? Well, apparently not. So it says it is estimated that as many as 100,000 high-ranking Nazis remained at large after the war. 100,000. For there to be that many tells us that the criminal cabal working behind the scenes were protecting them. It goes on to say, as such, it constitutes one of the largest and best funded, best trained, best equipped, and best connected cults in the world today, stated Peter Levenda. And the second generation is being trained, as we said before, where? London, Berlin, New York, all these places, various places around the world. But this surviving Nazi empire is said to still exert tremendous control over world economies. Now, I don't know whether or not you believe that to be true, but you have to consider some of the things that we see happening here. So listen to this. On May 19th, 1945, just 12 days after Germany's unconditional surrender, Herbert Wagner, creator of the first Nazi guided missile used in combat, landed in Washington, D.C. in a U.S. military aircraft with blacked out windows. Wagner was the first of a stream of Adolf's scientists, technicians, and others to arrive in the United States in a program that came to be known as Project Paperclip. It began as Operation Overcast, a program authorized by the Joint Chiefs of Staff to exploit the knowledge of Nazi scientists. So could that be why Byrd knew where to go when he got to Antarctica? It says Overcast was mentioned but not clearly explained in the 2006 film The Good German, starring George Clooney. This operation was renamed Paperclip and formally authorized in August 1945 by Truman, who was assured that no one with Nazi or militaristic records would be involved. By mid-November, more of Adolf's scientists, engineers, and technicians were arriving in America, including von Braun and more than 700 other Nazi rocket scientists. By 1955, nearly 1,000 of their scientists had been granted citizenship in the United States and given prominent positions in the American scientific community. Many had been longtime members of the Nazi Party and the Gestapo, had conducted experiments on humans, used slave labor, and committed other war crimes. So von Braun, who in later years became, listen, the head of NASA. is one of the more recognizable names of the paperclip scientists. Others included Major General Walter Dornberger, a close associate of von Braun. And they list some other physicists who founded quantum mechanics, gaseous uranium centrifuges, atomic bombs, uranium enrichment. So they list these folks. So CNN reporter Linda Hunt's 1991 book, Secret Agenda, The United States Government, Nazi Scientists, and Project Paperclip, first revealed the extent to which Nazi infiltration was aided by persons within the United States, federal government, and military. Like other researchers, Hunt found many government files pertaining to recruited Nazis missing or otherwise unavailable, despite government claims that paperclip ended in 1947. But she says this project was the biggest, longest-running operation involving these folks in our country's history. It continued nonstop until 1973, decades longer than was previously thought, and remnants of it are still in operation today. She says when details of paperclip finally reached the public's ears, the infusion of Nazis into America's military-industrial complex was complete. So Churchill was insistent that the occultism of the party should not under any circumstances be revealed to the general public. They knew what old boy Adolf was into. They knew. So it says the failure of the Nuremberg trials to identify the nature of the evil at work behind the outer facade of National Socialism convinced him that another 3 decades must pass before a large enough readership would be present to comprehend the initiation rites and black magic practices of the inner core of their leadership. And they're saying these statements were corroborated by one of the Nuremberg prosecutors, who said the occult aspect of the Nazis was ruled inadmissible because the tribunal thought that such beliefs, so contrary to Western public rationalism, might allow the leaders to go free by saying they were insane. Yeah. So it says even Adolf acknowledged that Nazi ideology ventured into a spiritual realm. So he said anyone who interprets National Socialism merely as a political movement knows almost nothing about it. It's more than religion. It's the determination to create a new man. So they turned to occultists. And this is how they got this Theosophical Society, Theosophy, started. It was an attempt to blend Christianity with Kabbalistic and Eastern mysticism. One tenet of Theosophy was that great masters, sometimes called the Great White Brotherhood. So that tells you they're not talking about us. The Great White Brotherhood are secretly directing humankind's evolution, I should say. Don't we see it happening? Now implanting chips in people's brains. We see it with AI. But apparently they didn't want this information to get out during that time. It says such groups were concerned with raising their consciousness by means of rituals to an awareness of evil and non-human intelligence in the universe, with achieving a means of communication with these intelligences. So they were contacting something. We know what they were contacting, demons, but Obviously, they were getting information as well. Let's go on. So it says the more sophisticated versions of the legend of Thule or Thule only gradually developed in the hands of Dietrich Eckart, and they named this other general, and were later refined and extended under direction of Reichsfuhrer SS Heinrich Himmler, who terrorized a large section of the German academic world into lending a professional hand at perpetuating the myth of German racial superiority. And here we are again, aren't we? Here we are again. So they say they were in contact with Black forces, not as in color, invisible hierarchies and unknown superiors, or as a magical elite in a remote age or distant location with which the Nazis were in contact. Now it says, although rumors have floated about for years that the Germans captured a UFO, no credible evidence has ever been produced. Some of those who have studied this issue have come to suspect that any such knowledge of non-human technology may instead have come through Nazi occultists using psychic means similar to remote viewing. Remote viewing, a psychic ability studied, taught, and used operationally by the U.S. Army, the CIA, and National Security Agency. Beginning when? In the early 1970s. The early 1970s. They created a unit of psychic spies within the United States Army using remote viewing, known in parapsychological terms as clairvoyance. It's the ability to discern persons, places, and things at a distance by means other than the normal five senses. What is this, you all? Witchcraft. Witchcraft. So, you all, this name for the psychic project, not a person, although apparently a German psychic who assumed the name of Grunbaum, may have lived in the United States after the war. So it's a reference to the green tree symbol in Kabbalah. So you see how the two relate? Which relates to the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. So this says, when Adolf lost the war and the victors began to divide the spoils, the United States and other countries dividing up the nuclear and rocket scientists had little or no concern for the mystical research. Russia, however, did. And so they took the scientists from this Dr. Grunbaum project back to Russia. Interestingly enough, it says, it was reported that the Nazi Dr. Grunbaum unit was connected to a broader program called MAGIC. And this name has prompted comparisons to America's original secrecy group, or original UFO secrecy group, called Magic 12. What are these people up to, family? Just take a look at this. This is something that Adolf and his folks had. Now think about what people were seeing in the 40s, these flying disc-shaped objects. Is this what they were seeing? Is that what they were seeing? Just think about it. Just think about it. If you're seeing that from a distance, is that what they were describing? So they want the world to believe that these things are coming from out there. when in fact it's coming from here. Here, often people are seeing these things going into the waters or going into mountains. So, what is this really about? What is this really about is the question we really need to be looking at. And now we need to look at the Catholic connection. Because when you look at what's happening in the world, you can't separate, you shouldn't separate church and state. The two have been in agreement for quite some time. They want to make it seem like there's a separation, but there really isn't. There really isn't. For the Catholic Church to have a telescope named Lucifer says it all. I mean, really, really. So we need to look at how they were involved in some of the things that happened during that time. And I think you'll find it interesting. This article says, what did the Vatican know about the Nazi escape routes? It says after World War II, thousands of them fled to South America along so-called Ratlines, often with the help of the Catholic clergy. The Vatican is now opening its archives from the time. It says some 90% of Nazi perpetrators who escaped Europe are thought to have fled across the Alps to Italy. To Italy. That was the first loophole. Their first stop was in the South Tyrol region of northern Italy, the monastery of the Teutonic Order in Murano. They went to the monastery? Yes, it says that's where they would hide out. These ratlines are also known as the monastery route, for years collecting money to continue their escape overseas. Sometimes Adolf's folks were accommodated right next to their former victims. And then Rome was the next stop. So all roads leading to Rome on this one. They had a letter from the Catholic Church confirming their identity, and they were handed a passport by the Red Cross, which issued about 120,000 papers until 1951. The story goes that even before the end of the war, there was a clearly thought out and elaborate plan for these people to escape. They were already planning their escape route. Look at this from The Guardian. Red Cross and Vatican helped thousands of them to escape. Research shows how travel documents ended up in hands of the likes of, and they list some of these folks like Mengele. So no, the people in that land may have suffered, but the masterminds, they got away. This is from the Roswell Daily Record. Mysterious encounter between military and UFOs. Where? In Argentina. Where did a lot of them go to? Argentina and Chile and South Africa, believe it or not. All right. On September 5th, the tranquil coastal city of Blanca in Argentina became embroiled in a mystery that has left the local community baffled and raised concerns nationwide. Reports have emerged of an alleged confrontation between the military and one or more UFOs on the outskirts of the city. The incident lasted approximately 23 minutes and has left the local population searching for answers. The initial reports of the incident reached the Roswell Daily Record through a series of videos and audio recordings captured by alarmed residents. Testimonies from the residents claim to have heard gunfire in the sky from dusk until nightfall. But the base commander issued a statement denying any incident and asserting that it was only a scheduled training exercise. So there's a link here. You're welcome to check out this archive space where they have a lot of pictures, documents, etc. of what was happening in Argentina in 1968. It says the Richard F. Haynes ufology papers includes documents that cover the period between the 1970s and 2010s. It includes personal and professional correspondence, administrative documents, and drafts of its research projects. So they presented a large set of UFO photos with notes and photo analysis, as well as audio tapes with interviews of witnesses. And the cassette tapes have been digitalized. So there's a reason why certain places experience a lot of sightings, particularly here in the United States and Roswell. So, Latin American history, alien sightings. It talks about during the Cold War, there were thousands of unidentified flying object sightings in Argentina. The mainstream media reported on many of them. Well, who did they bring into their country? The people who had the knowledge about these things. So it says this offers a picture of Cold War Argentina that breaks with long-standing popular and academic chronologies that stress a dictatorship versus democracy binary. So they talk about these things that were happening in Argentina and how it impacted the culture of Argentina, and include the enormous influence of U.S. popular culture as well as references to apocalyptic nuclear weapons and unscientific notions of psychoses in explaining late-night sightings of spacecraft and extraterrestrials. Interesting. You know what else they began to experience a lot of in those places where they went? This right here. Argentina, Catholic priests jailed for what? Doing what to deaf children? The same thing that they have been doing to children in parishes for what? How long now? And they can't seem to get a handle on this issue. It's a part of the fabric. It's a part of what it is. And people can't seem to get that. They're promoting this religion now, these fans, saying they're going home to the Catholic Church, Candace Owens being one of them. Why aren't they really looking into why the church can't seem to get a handle on this issue? Why is it every time you talk about this topic, the church is involved somehow? Why? The Catholic Church has faced an avalanche of child sexual abuse accusations around the world for the last few decades, more than decades. So look at this one here that they're carting off in the wheelchair. I wish somebody would just knock his butt out of it, but anyway, let's go on. So they took him to court, and it says a crowd of mainly young people cheered the verdicts outside the court. So a factory worker says, "You have no idea how important this is for us." The father of one of the victims was quoted as saying, The church has been trying to hide these abuses. Don't we know it? But these priests, we can see what they did. They were messing with children, not just any children, deaf children. So he said today the taboo against accusing these priests stops here. In Chile, it says justice eludes victims of Catholic clergy. Look at this, years after the crisis exploded. Why? Because the church would intervene and hide the records. So not only are they hiding the criminals involved in everything that happened in World War II, they're hiding these pedophiles. Why? Is it all connected? Listen, soon after she learned what happened, it says Helmut Kramer's mother grabbed a pair of scissors and cut the priest out of the photographs from her son's baptism. So the daughter's saying, my mom is still Catholic, but she never attended Mass again. She says that she will never set foot in a church, and she does not trust the Pope or any priests. So, and it's a hymn, sorry. His mother's feelings echo hundreds of Chileans who have distanced themselves from the Catholic Church since 2010, when victims of another priest, and they named this priest Fernando Caradima, raised awareness about what was going on in the South American country. So it's saying the Caradima case shook the Vatican itself and marred Pope Francis's trip to Chile in 2018. Instead of applause, the people were protesting against his visit for this reason. And it says the scenario worsened when Francis accused the victims of slander. Accused the victims. And then he later admitted he made grave errors in judgment and invited them to Rome to beg their forgiveness. Give me a break. So according to the polls, the decline in confidence in the Chilean Catholic Church is one of the largest in Latin America. It fell from 77% in 1996 to 31% in 2020. Half of Chile's 18 million population identify as Catholic, and the number of religiously unaffiliated rose from 18% to 35%. It says this wasn't a crisis. This was a cultural break from the Catholic Church. Chilean society felt cheated by the church. There has been little justice in cases of clerical abuse. Some offenders were defrocked, but few have received criminal convictions because the Catholic Church is blocking it. Some died before receiving any punishment from the church or the courts. Why? Why is that? Why were they harboring the criminals? Listen to this, how South America became a Nazi haven. After World War II, many Nazi war criminals changed their identities and escaped across the Atlantic. Only some were captured and brought to justice. After Germany was defeated in World War II and the magnitude of Nazi war atrocities became apparent to the world, many in the party's elite, especially those who masterminded the Holocaust, knew they needed to disappear. With help from friendly governments and even the Catholic Church. Go ahead and put the United States on that list. Thousands of the SS members changed their identities, quietly escaped to South America, and slid into new lives. Some evaded captures. Others were tracked down and brought to justice. Not many of them, if you had 100,000 of them escaping. It says, due to the hundreds of thousands of German immigrants who lived in the country, Argentina maintained close ties with Germany. Hundreds of thousands of them lived there. In the years after the end of the war, their president, Juan Perón, secretly, it says, ordered diplomats and intelligence officers to establish escape routes called Ratlines to smuggle them out of Europe. Interesting, right? So it says the Argentine president also sought to recruit them, the ones with particular military, scientific, and technical expertise that he believed could help his country, much like the United States and the Soviet Union, both of which poached scientists from the Third Reich to assist them during the Cold War. In their attempts to aid Catholic refugees amid the post-war rise of communist regimes across Europe, numerous Vatican officials unwittingly, really, aided in the escape of the war criminals. It says some of them did so with full knowledge of their actions. Full knowledge. It says some of them admired Adolf. Yeah. The wicked. I'm just telling you. It says many of those who escaped were never brought to justice, like the ones who created the gas chambers. They never faced justice. On this side of things, that is. And it says it was because the country's Supreme Federal Court refused to extradite this guy because of inaccuracies in the paperwork. Now, the most notorious, Mengele, the one called Angel of Death, who conducted experiments on people, he went to Argentina in 1949 before moving to Paraguay in 1959 and Brazil a year later. He's buried under an assumed name after drowning off the Brazilian coast in 1979. His identity was confirmed after they used forensic testing on his remains. So it says in some cases, the U.S. was complicit in the exodus of the war criminals to South America. Following the war, U.S. counterintelligence corps recruited this one named Klaus Barbie, who played a role in eliminating thousands of the Ish people. But he was smuggled to Bolivia, where he continued his spy work and instructed the military regime on how to torture people. Just think about that. Just think about that. They helped. It says why Argentina accepted these criminals. Why did they? They did so knowingly. So the key takeaway, Argentina accepted them. And then what happened? What began happening to their children? What happened to their children? So people helped them escape, namely the Roman Catholic Church. It says even those accused of the most heinous crimes, the most heinous, were allowed to escape. So it says it's not like World War II ended one day in 1945 and suddenly everyone realized how horrible they had been, or those people had been. Even after Germany was defeated, there were many powerful men in Europe who had favored their cause and continued to do so. So they helped them find a safe haven. It says these men retained their positions after the war. Switzerland helped out. It says the Catholic Church was extremely helpful, as several high-ranking church officials, including Pope Pius, actively aided in their escape. Actively aided in their escape, family. What are we talking about here? There's more to cover on this. I hope you know that. There's so much more to cover on this. It's sickening, but we have to look again at the two parts of it, the spiritual as well as the political. Now let's bring it home to what's happening here. When I covered the session, hopefully you all listened to that one I did about this administration and how the Catholic Church put some people in strategic places to make sure this one would win the presidency. And you all, if you look at it from the spiritual and political aspect, and then now you see this push to get people to join the Catholic Church, those with clout, the large platforms, the 4 million, 2 million platform, etc. You can see that there's something else going on behind the scenes. Remember, we found out that Vance converted in 2019. Who was his mentor? Peter Thiel. Hopefully you watched that session. Peter Thiel. So the Catholics were behind that push to say the election had been rigged, and they started this campaign to get the one that we have now re-elected, because they were saying he's more Catholic than Biden, even though Biden was a Catholic. I need you to see this, family. The push was to get him in because they knew he could win elections. His number two couldn't. But number two is more in line with the doctrine of Rome. Not only with Rome, with the Ish. Now let's look at another thing. Don't you think all of these people knew what Donald Trump was before they elected him twice? All of these things that they're bringing out in the media, it was known before. It was known during the first election. They knew all of that. They kept trying to sweep it under the rug. They knew what he was, right? So why is it all of a sudden, they're just going to open the floodgates? Now they're astonished and they're just shocked. And, how could we have such a president involved in all of this stuff? That's who he was then. He didn't change. You had the Paula Whites of the religious world trying to make him into something that evangelicals would accept. And they did. Oh, he's a baby Christian. He's a baby Christian. A baby Christian who repents for nothing. If he opens his mouth, you already know what time it is. But he's a baby Christian. Those folks knew what he was then. But all of a sudden, what happened when the Ish leader went to D.C. a few weeks ago? Wasn't it the next day that all of a sudden the floodgates open about Epstein? What did he tell Trump he wanted? He wanted him to get rid of Iran, and he wanted regime change. in Iran. I do believe that Trump was hesitant and didn't want to do it, didn't want to go through. And now those who know where the bodies are hidden are saying, okay, we're going to show you who's boss. Because you told us that you were going to help us get rid of them. And now we see you didn't even get rid of all of their weapons. Put it all together, family. So you have the state on one hand, as in the fake state. They're on his case because they wanted him to do certain things. And most sources believe that Epstein had ties to them. So, of course, they know what was in those files. Of course, they know. Of course, they know where the other information is that Ghislaine has. Of course, they know. So you have those folks wanting him out because he didn't follow through on what they wanted. And then you have the religious ones who want number two in that position because he's in line with what they believe in. Now, let's remember who his mentor was, Peter Thiel. And you might want to Google Peter Thiel's husband. Just saying. So there's more going on here than meet the eyes, family. There's more going on behind the scenes. They want him gone now because a better alignment would be Vance and the new Pope. Just think about it. Just think about it. Just think about it. No coincidence that he's on the tarmac, having the priest put his ashes on his head for Lent. Come on now. Come on. It's not a coincidence that the talking heads are all of a sudden promoting Catholicism and telling people they're coming home to the Catholic Church. How in the world can you talk about the actions of this president and not address the actions of the Roman Catholic Church, who's been doing this dirty, low-down stuff to children for how long now? Are we just going to skip over that and pretend that it's not there? Where was this Pope? Where did he spend most of his time? Which country? Come on. There's more to this. We need to see what's happening behind the scenes. They're trying to bring certain things out to the forefront, and they need the right people in place for what comes next. And we need to be able to look at things and be discerning. Of course, with prayer and asking the Most High to reveal those hidden things that they're trying to keep hidden. But I watch these channels and these people who just seem so enraged all of a sudden. I can't believe that his name, oh, come on. You couldn't believe that about him. You could not believe that about him. All of these women accusing him all these years, but you couldn't believe that about him. The pictures were already online about things he was doing, but all of a sudden, there's this big uproar about what's in the files. Don't you think Bondi knew she was in Florida when Epstein went to court? She knew who was in there. Please. Like I said before, these people are trying to play us. They're trying to play us. All right, let's look at some comments because I know I covered quite a bit. And again, there's more to discuss on this. We'll get to it in the next session. If you're just joining us and you have not hit the like, please go ahead and do that for us. We greatly appreciate it. Yes, they've been trying to put the squeeze on this series, but hey, we're going to keep going. I just need you all to help us with spreading the information, sharing it as much as you can, hitting the like, etc. And we're going to keep going. As I mentioned, they took a video down. I'm still getting notices. Oh, this one, there's an issue with this one. That one's like, you know what? Most High is in your hands. We already know, what time it is. So those who need to hear it will hear it. And I trust the Most High to spread it. So let's take a look at your comments. Victor Wade said they want to come to light and want to be discovered, but the powers that be doesn't want to reveal them due to mass hysteria and panic. Yeah, and I think really what it is they're trying to tie it in with a returning Messiah, per se, so that people will think like, these are the ones who we should be worshiping. They have the knowledge, etc. So I think a lot of that ties in together. But yeah, there's more going on behind the scenes. RPS, I've never seen an alien, but the vehicle I have. There is not a country on the face of this planet that has working technology like that. I watched it for 45 minutes, and this was in 2007. You all, I have to share this story with you. I was talking to one of my aunties a few months ago, and we were talking about, actually, I think it was last year when they were having all these sightings, and I was talking to her about it, why all of a sudden they're seeing all this. She said, we saw one. I'm like, we who? She said, when I was a little girl, me and your other aunt, we were with our grandmother. They were going to the bus stop where my great-grandfather was getting off from work, and they would meet him when he was getting off. And she said, we were walking with our grandmother, and we saw this silver thing spinning in the sky, and it was coming toward us. And our grandmother said to them, run, children. That is not an airplane. And they took off running. And I called my other aunt. She says, yeah, that did happen. I'm like, why didn't you all tell somebody this? It's like, well, we just didn't think about it. But she started describing the thing, and she said, we saw these circling lights rotating under it, and it looked like those dish-shaped things that they were showing on TV. God. So, yeah, I have a family member, 2 aunties, who say they saw it years ago. So that would have been, I'm thinking that would have been in the 50s. Yeah, 50s. 50s, early 60s, I would think. So anyway, let's see what else you were saying. Victor said, I did some research on Admiral Byrd and saw multiple investigations done on this man. I believe this is a true story, especially the multiple account of this man's experience. They are real. Victor, do you know what happened to his son, Admiral Byrd's son? If you haven't, looked that up too. Yeah, people just seem to come up missing, or they Epstein them. Folks are a Forrestal that took over. Some strange things happened with him. Yeah. Lizette says these demons are up to something. They found hidden resources. Of course we know they did. Of course we know they did. Charles says, since the end of World War II, a lot of advancements in the aerospace industry and satellites technology took place rapidly. Absolutely. It happened too fast. Happened too fast. Miss Love says, sounds like a Twilight Zone episode. We were invited to go to Mars and didn't know that we were on the menu. Oh my gosh. Yes, that's exactly what happens, Sadak. They always label you as crazy first, then they get rid of you. So if they can get by with making them think that you're Looney Tunes, then they won't have to do anything to you. But I do believe that they now have some folks who are serving in the role of controlled opposition. They're the ones presenting the slow leak information, etc. Saw says, our covenant is with the Most High. Their covenant is with the devil. Absolutely. Shaya, I think they're going to try to use the truth to their benefit as they usually do, for sure. Bernadette, they're definitely working with other species, but they're not from other worlds. Yeah. Demonic forces. Carla, I have heard Byrd's account and those of others and have come to believe them. Much is hidden from us, but leaked in predictive programs. Yeah, because I can't move away from the fact that they just suddenly acquired all of this new technology. It's like, there's something to that. Notorious Hebrew, it's the appointed time for this truth to be revealed. Absolutely, because we don't want to be deceived. So we need to watch as well as pray. Minister Gwinnett, I believe him the hidden truth. Why did they shut him up? Yeah. But the son that released the diary, yeah. So his name is Emmanuel. No, he saw what he saw. Remember the author of the Pale Horse. A lady also said she went to this place that Byrd went to. Interesting. Dennis says, Teo Ministries did a teaching on this a while back. Okay, I missed that then. I didn't know that. Awesome then. You all have other resources that you can pull from. Roderick, it really ain't no telling what's out there. It's a lot being kept from us. True. Absolutely. Shaya being an admiral and having all that distinguished titles, he had too much to lose to come up with this craziness. Yeah, I'm thinking, and he kept it hidden. The diary didn't come out till after his death, but even in the interview, he seemed really uncomfortable to me. Like, I have to make sure I don't say the wrong thing, that type of look. Hey, Brother Harold, he says the truth is stranger than fiction. Absolutely. Absolutely. C. Foster says Antarctica topics always catch my interest. Awesome. Yeah, as I said, I've been looking into some of this for a while. Yeah. I mean, looking at some of this information, you can clearly see that there's another force at work here, evil force, we should say, that's trying to now lead the public down a road to make them think that these folks or these things are going to be coming from outer space, that they're helpful, they want to help man. Yeah, right. Right. The threat, us 89. JoJo's Bizarre Adventures had an arc where they had to go to Germany and the Germans were playing in some tune to try to get more text so that they can be more advanced in the war. Not only that, you have to think about what they have to do to get information from the fallen. The sacrifice, the rituals, etc. And a lot of those things have to do with children. I did a segment. Ooh, getting tongue-tied. Might be time to call it quits. I did a segment on that a while back. They want innocent lives for their little lambs. So I think you all know what I mean by that. Let's see. Council's Girl, remember the movie Independence Day when they were trying to get close to this alien aircraft and it took control? Yes, I do remember that scene. So I've been looking at several books. There are some of them that'll make your hair stand on your head as you're looking into what Hitler and friends were into. I don't advise reading a lot of these books. I mean, usually I'm praying, asking the Most High to protect my mind, my heart. And it's like I get in and out, get in to get the information that I need, and that's it. So I share a lot of resources. I don't advise reading some of them, particularly when they get into certain things like this one about the vril. I don't know if you all know about that, VRIL. That's supposed to be the name of the source that they tap into. Yeah, a lot of that stuff. Be careful. Pray before you just go pick up things and read, because you don't want some of the stuff in your spirit. Trust me, you don't want a lot some of these things, in your spirit where you're meditating on these things, because they were into some strange things. So let's see what else we got. And then we'll wrap up. Mr. Original School, greetings to you. How are you doing? Nice to have you with us. Hello to all of our moderators. Good to have you. Again, if you're just now joining us, if you could hit the like, we greatly appreciate it. Good evening to you, Dwayne, Roderick. You notice the 7 nations, huh? All. Yeah, I noticed that too, Vita. He seemed very uncomfortable to me. Okay, so Brother Charles, you picked up, yeah, strange things. Strange things. I agree with you, Masha Yahoo. They went after the lower level offenders because the one with the knowledge and the information to help them, they protected. They brought them here. So patiently awaiting, y'all. This keeps getting deeper and darker. Some strange things, but this is what they're into. This is what they have to do. Some of them are channelers. They are making connection to forces in demonic realms. That's exactly what they're doing. This is where they're getting that information and making it seem like, they're just that knowledgeable. They're just that smart, but I don't believe it. Brother Calvin, I used to work at Lockheed, the Lazy L, and on the B1B program. Okay, you probably know some things, because they were also included in some of the research where a lot of those German scientists were taking there. And they had a lot of stuff going on over there at Lockheed. So, yeah. Let's see. Let's see what else. Okay, a few more, and then we're going to wrap up. Yeah, big time, Sunray. A lot of them were into that. And I do believe that Epstein went both ways. I do believe that, yeah. So anyway. Marcus says, I was in uniform and made a wrong turn when stealth tech was being worked on and stopped coal. I'm sure. It's like, no. Certain eyes can see this, certain eyes can't. And there are some things you probably don't want to see because they are very protective about their information. But may the Most High continue to reveal it, to expose it. Let whistleblowers come forth and expose what's going on. My thing is, why was the Catholic Church so inclined to protect and hide them? You have to think about that. Don't just look at the political aspect. Look at the spiritual as well. All right. Let's see. Yeah, JD, a lot of them are scared right now. It will be interesting to see how far they'll let it go. I mean, I think today they were saying that the lawyer that Epstein had, that he suddenly passed away, and they say, oh, it's because he was old. Interesting that it just happened now. But I mean, it's possible. He was just an old man. It's possible. Let's see. Oh, it means that twill will be taken out and replaced by V. Well, you have to think about that, because that's what happened with RFK. It's like, you don't do what we want, then we need to put somebody in there who will. So, makes you think. Makes you think. I'm just going to pull a few more here. Oh, Nikki says, I am so back. Well, welcome back. Welcome back. Yes, Roberta, sorry. They did have that anti-gravity jet. Yes. Think about that. And that's what people are seeing. I believe that's what they were seeing. So let's see. Yahuwah's Salvation believes that they've had the technology for a while. That's possible. They may not have had the minerals or the resources to put a lot of this stuff together. I don't know. But it certainly is possible. Yes, that is the name of the place that he supposedly went to, called Argartha or Argatha. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Let's see. Yeah, Delina. Old money. Old money. And by all accounts, I think they had only met each other like 19 or 20 days prior to tying the knot. Interesting. I mean, yeah. All right, you all, we're going to wrap up, because, I mean, there's a lot to discuss here. There's a lot in here. If you want to go back and rewatch some things, please do. I have so many sources. It's kind of hard to know which ones to pull from, and just trying to truncate things in smaller segments so that it won't be so overwhelming, particularly for folks who are not familiar with this type of information. Like I said, I've been, studying some of this and following some of these folks who, are out there for about 15 years. I shouldn't say following, but kind of listening to what they're putting out there and just kind of connecting dots to see what's happening here. You all may want to go and look for that Teo video, because I didn't know that he had one out on that, but there's definitely more to this. Roberta Lane says, I recently bought a book explaining Vril. My late husband said it's witchcraft, throw it out. I forgot I had bought it, but found it, as I believe reminded me to see if I would obey. Yeah, that one, there's some strange stuff concerning that. A lot of it is Kabbalistic. mixing that with sorcery, stuff from the Talmud, etc. So yeah, just be careful. Don't just think, you need to read everything. Some have an assignment, where they're assigned to bring out certain informations. Even with that, you still have to pray and ask the Most High to protect you so that, it's like in and out, just get the information that you need. And, I'm not going to be dwelling on this type of stuff. So, yes, Imuna says some things are better left untouched. Studying certain ancient demons will open portals you don't want open. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I definitely agree with you. And I have to be careful, to just only share certain things. There's a lot out there that could be shared, but it's like, we'll leave that one there, right there. That might be a bit much. So there you go, Stephen. Still Babylon, like mother, like daughter. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's who they are. They've been doing this for a while. Just think about it. The Greeks were doing it. The Romans were doing it. They passed that wickedness down. They're passing it down. Argentina started seeing UFOs. Google it. Look at, and there's a lot happening there and in Chile, really. Both of them. It's like, okay, well, now you know why. And it really exploded here in the United States. So now you know why. They brought the people here who had that technology. Let's see. Okay. J0 says, I think the name of that video from Teo is titled Childhood Inn. Okay, well then you all look that one up. I have not seen it. But thank you for sharing the name of it for those who want to check that one out as well. All right. We're going to end there because, as I said, there's so much to share and to get into on this topic. Again, go ahead and hit the like for us, family. And we're going to wrap it up with that. Peace and blessings to all of you. Join me next time.